I used to sit by the lake every morning, sipping coffee and listening to loons echo across the water. It was quiet, sacred, until one day, bulldozers rolled in and steel climbed over my shoreline like a parasite. They said I didn't own the view. 66 condos went up, fast and greedy, cutting trees, choking the earth. I warned them. This lake gives, but it also takes. They didn't listen. But when flood season came, nature answered for me. My name is Walter Green. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in Chestnut Bend, a small rural township in Minnesota, all my life. My grandfather homesteaded this land. Back then, the lake wasn't just water, it was life. Fishing in the summer, skating in the winter, families gathering at the dock for 4th of July picnics. We didn't need much, just space and sky. When my parents passed, I inherited the family cottage, a modest A-frame that sits peacefully on the edge of Lake Wexley. The lake was never big enough for motors or speedboats, and that's what kept it perfect. Just wind, water, and whispers. But time doesn't just pass, it pushes. And with it came the developers. I first heard the rumors during a township meeting. A real estate group, Alterra Holdings, had bought the property across from me. That stretch of shore had been vacant for decades, full of reeds, frogs, and nesting cranes. We all assumed it was protected wetland. Turns out it wasn't. Within 2 months, the permits were approved. The old trees started falling. Bulldozers carved up the shoreline, and steel foundations started rising like a slab across the water. 66 luxury condos. I voiced my concern, wrote letters, even met with the town board. But I was told the same thing every time. They're within their rights, Mr. Green. You don't own the lake. Maybe not. But I knew something they didn't. You see, every few years, Lake Wexley floods. It's not loud or sudden. It rises slow and steady, like breath being held too long. It floods in patterns, and I'd studied them for 40 years. In 1991, the water reached the old oak near the edge of their property. In 2002, it wiped out the fishing shack that once stood where their parking lot now lay. In 2017, it nearly took my dock. Every time, nature warned us. I tried to tell them. I showed them photographs, high water marks, historical data. I offered them advice man to man. One of the project leads laughed in my face. We got engineers, old-timer. The condos went up fast, glass, chrome, stone patios, lakeside fire pits. Units sold in weeks. People from the city flooded in. Families with boats, Instagram smiles, and no idea what they were buying into. I watched them drop paddleboards into the lake like they owned it. Their kids ran through marshland where herons used to nest. At night, lights from their decks reflected across the surface, blinding the moon. They paved over the runoff channels. They tore down the buffer trees. They forgot one rule: this lake remembers. And then came spring. Not just any spring, but one after the snowiest winter we'd had in over a decade. The ground was soaked. The rivers were full. And Lake Wexley? It began to rise. Slowly, steadily, silently. Every morning I woke up and measured it. An inch, then 2. By April, my dock was underwater, but I didn't panic. I'd seen this before. I knew when to move my chairs. I knew when to shift my woodpile uphill. But the condos? They weren't built with knowing. They were built with arrogance. By mid-April, the underground parking had standing water. By May, 2 basement units had black mold. By June, the shoreline wall they'd installed cracked and collapsed. The fire pits were submerged. The patios split. Their engineers came out, frantic, confused, stuttering terms like unexpected surge and unusual seasonal saturation. But nature wasn't unusual. It was predictable if you respected it. They called it a freak flood. I called it a reckoning. The water didn't just stop at the patios. By the second week of June, it reached the electrical boxes. The homeowners association scrambled. They brought in pumps, sandbags, even floated the idea of installing a temporary levee. But the damage was already done. One night, during a thunderstorm, the lake surged 3 feet in a matter of hours. I watched from my porch as headlights bobbed in the underground garage. Water burst through the lower units like broken glass. And then, silence. The condos, once full of noise and laughter, turned ghostly. People evacuated. Generators failed. The $900,000 units were now mildewed aquariums. I wasn't smug. I wasn't laughing. I just sipped my coffee, same place I always had, watching the lake restore what had been stolen. A week later, Alterra Holdings sent out press releases blaming anomalous weather patterns and climate instability. But I knew better. So did the State Department of Natural Resources. Turns out, when Alterra rushed construction, they failed to file proper floodplain elevation reports. They ignored 2 geological surveys. And worst of all, they filled the natural drainage ditches that once funneled overflow safely downstream. The homeowners? They were furious. Lawsuits began flying like mosquitoes in July. One by one, families sold at a loss. Some units were condemned entirely. The county deemed half the site uninhabitable during high-risk seasons. But the real blow came in August. After a month-long investigation, the county board slapped Alterra with a $2.7 million fine for environmental negligence, and the state ordered the land to be rezoned as protected wetland. The same wetland it had been before greed paved it over by fall. Nature began to reclaim her rhythm. Reeds sprouted again by the shoreline. I spotted 3 cranes nesting not far from where the Condos walking trail used to be. Even the frogs returned. And me? I built a small wooden bench where my father's dock used to stand. Engraved a plaque on it. Some things you don't build, you honor. I never raised a hand. Never blocked a permit. Never fought with fists or fire. I just waited. Because nature doesn't forget. And sometimes, the best revenge is no revenge at all. Just time, silence, and a rising tide. 6 months later, I received a letter. One of the remaining residents, a young couple who had just moved in when the flood hit, asked if they could rent my cabin while their unit was being gutted. They had 2 kids, a dog, and tears in their eyes. I looked at them and saw something I hadn't in a while: humility. So I said yes. And every evening, I watched their children run through the field, not over it. They planted new wildflowers. They asked questions about the lake. They listened. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learn to live with the land, not on top of it. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of remembering. Remembering that land isn't a product. That lakes aren't decoration. That silence isn't emptiness. It's wisdom. They try to take what wasn't theirs. But nature, she always takes it back. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about what it means to protect the land we love, please consider subscribing to the channel. Movie Camera, we tell true feeling, emotionally charged animated stories, everyday stories that resonate, challenge, and inspire. Like, share, and leave a comment if you've ever seen nature fight back, or if you've learned something from the stillness.